With over 20 years of experience at Microsoft, Principal Software Engineer Dr. Jason Cook is a wealth of knowledge and expertise. I sat down with him to gain career advice and, of course, indulge in some Microsoft gossip. If you missed my last video on software engineers at Microsoft, here's a recap of what Jason works on.
Our team, we do analytics for app service and a few other services. And basically what that entails is collecting data from different sources, telemetry data, kind of collating it, collecting it, and then we process it. We basically cook it. We combine it with other data sources, and then eventually we export it to some like database that other people can use. And that's kind of what our team mostly focuses on. And so in my role, it's making sure that the pipeline is running smoothly and efficiently, and kind of updating the tools to make sure any tools that we need to use are doing the things we want. For example, we might get a request to pull in data from a new data source that we haven't pulled it in from before. And so we might need to investigate tools. We might need to write some code to get that to work.
Naturally, I asked him about promotions and his philosophy on them, and what are the different levels of software engineering.
Software engineer 2, I think then it's senior software engineer, and then principal software engineer. And then within each level, there are 2 internal levels, which have number values that Microsoft uses. So they're kind of different ways to basically upgrade your career path. Microsoft has some documentation about kind of what's expected from each role at each level. Basically, do what you did at the previous level, but more. Your scope is more. You do more of what you did before. Whereas before you might be responsible for part of a feature. Oh, you're responsible for a full feature. I know some people, and they are very concerned about their careers, and they're like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then next year I'm going to get a promotion to this, and then I'll do this, and by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a VP of something, and that's what motivates them. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm more interested in kind of doing the work, and being good at what I'm doing, kind of more heads down. And as I'm doing the work, it's like, oh, hey, I want to take more ownership of this feature. I want to make sure that this thing is working the best it can. And so it's kind of, I think, hitting the same points, but kind of from a different perspective.
That's an interesting way to approach promotions. I then asked him if he had any advice when faced with conflicts at the workplace.
I'd say some general advice to have, that kind of regardless of what you're going to do, is to kind of a way of kind of mitigating some conflict you might encounter. I had one manager once, and they would ask, like at one-on-one one week, they'd ask me to do something. I would do that thing, and then the next week I'd come back, show them what I did, and they'd be like, well, why did you do that? And it was a cause of some conflict. Well, it caused some conflict for me. And the way I found to mitigate that was to, at the end of our one-on-ones, when we talked about what we'd be working on next, I would go back to my office. I'd write down what we had talked about and summarize it. And then I'd send a copy of that to my manager to make sure we're on the same page. And this kind of having a paper trail can help mitigate some of those incidents that you have where there might be an oversight, somebody might forget, but it's I think a good thing in general to kind of keep paper trails of things when doing your work, to make sure everyone's on the same page and that you have something to look back on to make sure you're doing the right thing, and also that you have something you can share and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Super useful advice. Now, time for the tea. I had to ask him, have you met Bill Gates?
I did see him in person at a couple of on-campus events. He was up on stage, and it's like, oh, I'm like 50 feet away. Wow. Before my time, when people got hired at Microsoft, there would often be a big barbecue for like each I guess it was like each week, maybe once a month, he'd have all the new employees come over to his house for a barbecue.
Obviously, there's too many employees for everyone to fit in even Bill Gates' house. So I asked Jason what the celebrations look like these days.
When I first joined, uh, uh, I was on the visual studio team, dev div, in our group, programmer writer group. We went on a 3-day vacation to this Winthrop Lodge up in north central Washington during the winter, and it's beautiful up there. It was snowy. There's all expense paid. For our family, and it's like, oh, that's really nice. Even then, people were complaining. It's like, oh, 5 years ago, they sent us up to Alaska for something, and now we only get to go to Central Washington. Um, and every year, the ship stuff was less fancy. One year, there was a party in the parking garage under the building. That was our ship party. I mean, they tried to make it look nice, but there's still a party in a parking garage. And these days, there aren't ship parties anymore. Since for the stuff that we work on, we're continuously shipping app service. So there's no kind of points in time where we say, oh, we need to have a party to commemorate this. I think we did have a 10-year app service party, but that was just in the building. I think we had cake.
Well, that's a bit unfortunate. So I wondered in what other ways Microsoft has evolved over the years.
Before the pandemic, I was working home from 1 day a week for 1 day a week. And that I was kind of taking that as my focus day. And so I just like focused kind of being heads down. It's like, okay, no meetings. And during that time, I found that anytime I needed to work with somebody who was on campus, it was pretty difficult. Because there wasn't kind of that muscle memory built up of like, oh, yeah, there are people who are working remotely. Like, for example, there would be meetings, like there'd be a meeting room, and then nobody from the meeting room would connect to the Teams meeting. And be like, oh, I just can't attend the meeting at all because nobody invited the room. And these days, people are much more responsive. They're like, oh, yeah, Teams is something that I have to be responsive to, and so it's a lot easier to get help from people online these days. There have been a lot of interesting people I've met at Microsoft, and some of them have left Microsoft, and it's neat to see kind of what they're doing in other places now. And so the people are still here in different roles. Another interesting thing is kind of seeing how the campus has changed over the years. It's Microsoft campus. They've gone through a big kind of renovation lately, and kind of seeing the old buildings. Some of the old buildings I used to work in, they're not there anymore. There's new buildings.
And on that note, stay tuned for Microsoft Headquarters Campus Tour. Thanks for watching!